Hi, this is Patty Bennett. I am an independent Stampin' Up! Demonstrator. I have been a demonstrator since 1995, and I am so excited that you have decided to join me today to learn about these amazingly beautiful watercolor background lighthouse cards. I am really excited about these. I think they turned out so pretty. We are using the High Tide Stampin' Up! Stamp set and also the Stampin' Up! Watercolor paper. In this video tutorial, I will show you how to do the background on the watercolor paper and how I stamped the lighthouse. So let's get going. The color palette I used for the watercolor backgrounds might surprise you a little bit. I used Sweet Sugar Plum, Flirty Flamingo, Watermelon Wonder, Bermuda Bay, and Daffodil Delight. I also used the Stampin' Up! Clear Block E, and if you don't know about the letters, they are printed on the side or the end of each block, so that's what I'm referring to as E. This is one of the larger blocks. And the Stampin' Up! Watercolor paper. My first step is to apply some of the ink from the ink pad directly onto that clear block E. And so I am going to start with the lightest color and just put some yellow towards the center. And then using the Sweet Sugar Plum, I'm going to put some closer to the top, and then Flirty Flamingo up on top of that, and the Watermelon Wonder, which is the darkest, at the top. So you can see I have there a bit of a rainbow of colors. And yes, it might transfer just a little bit from ink pad to ink pad, but when you go from lightest to darkest, you don't have to worry about that much, and you can always just blot it with a paper towel and re-ink your stamp pad if you need to. And then I'm putting the Bermuda Bay down at the bottom, and I learned that you don't need a lot. I was putting way too much of the blue, and it was just overtaking the whole watercolor background. So I've just got a little bit of blue at the bottom. So you'll want to place your block with all those colors on your work surface. I've protected it with just an old washcloth. I have a spritzer bottle with water, and I have my pre-cut watercolor paper. I went ahead and cut this to 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 so that it's full card front size, and then I'll be trimming it down later. So you just take your spritzer bottle and you spritz fairly generously, like what am I doing? Maybe 8 or 10 spritzes onto your block. And then I just laid my paper down. And since I'm going to trim it later, I am not worrying too much about if it's perfectly centered or if it is a little bit crooked. That's okay, because I am going to trim it down. Okay, so I've given it just a moment for that color and water to soak in. Now I found that if you take it from the top and pull it up, then your blue doesn't run all up. I was doing it kind of wrong on the first few, and I was pulling it up from there, and the blue ran through the whole thing. So there we have a beautiful rainbow of color, and it's okay that that dripped down there, because remember, we are going to trim this, and we are going to be adding, let me just show you, the lighthouse and some ground. So you can cover, like here I probably had a little drip there and I covered it. So we have ways that we can cover up any drips that might be a little unsightly. So there is our beautiful rainbow background. Now of course you don't have to use it only with this lighthouse set. You could use this technique with any stamps or die cuts or anything that you want to put on top of there. And any of these supplies you can purchase in my online store. If you go to my blog at pattystamps.com, you can click any of the shop online buttons to find these products. All right, so then I'm just going to dab off just that one little drip that was hanging on down there, set this aside, and when that dries, we'll be able to layer our card together. And then I just take my washcloth and I just wipe that off so that if I want to add color again, I have a clean block to do that. When I was trying to decide how I wanted to stamp my lighthouse, I just got out some Whisper White cardstock, the two-step stamps. So there are two images that create the actual lighthouse. And I just started stamping, and I wrote down the colors I used because I wasn't sure what was going to look good. So I did like the tone on tone. For instance, this is Dapper Denim and Dapper Denim on both of those stamped on top of each other. Then I tried to do the shadow with Basic Gray. It was a little too dark, didn't turn out very well, but I found that Smoky Slate was just the perfect color for that shadow. So then I stamped the Smoky Slate shadow on top of the Real Red on Crumb Cake, and then I did Smoky Slate on top of Smoky Slate. You may have noticed when I was showing you these cards before that I basically used either red or blue as my color scheme for the lighthouse on these cards, and also that each background does turn out a little bit differently. When they dry, they look a little different, and all the colors just kind of come out a little bit different. So don't ever try to think that you're going to exactly duplicate your background, because they definitely come out different every time, but they're so pretty. So to stamp the lighthouse, I'm going to do this one in red because I have one of the Island Indigo samples right here. And this is the watercolor paper. I wanted it to be the same kind of texture and feel as the rest of the card, so I did stamp it on watercolor paper. And really, it doesn't matter which one you stamp first. I kind of found that for me it was a little bit easier to stamp the larger solid image first, and that's the one that you're going to do in the color. And then this one that just has the shadow down the side will be second in the Smoky Slate. And I'm letting that really soak in because, you know, on the watercolor paper, it takes a minute, you know, for it to all get down in there. And then I will ink this one, which is the shadow part, in Smoky Slate. And after a little trial and error, I want to show you a little tip. I found that if I took my Smoky Slate marker and with the brush tip I added, let me do it right there so you can see, a little extra Smoky Slate ink where the top of that lighthouse is. When I stamp it, you'll see that it adds a little extra definition. I'm sorry, I hope my head doesn't get in the shot too much here, because you have to kind of look straight down. Let's see, I hope that lined up. It's hard without putting your eyes directly down over. Okay, so there we have the lighthouse with the shadow, and then it's a little bit darker up here. If I would have done that, excuse me, without adding the marker to it, you would have seen that that was very light. So I really like that little extra touch with the Smoky Slate marker. And then I have my soft suede ink pad, and this is the sand that the stamp image in this set. And you'll see here that it has that little notch for the base of the lighthouse. Pretty tricky. That was so smart of Stampin' Up! To do that. And I know this is going to go a little off the edge here, but that's okay. And I'm going to stamp that right around the base of the lighthouse. And so there I have my sand that I can use as the base. So I can cut part of it out, I can cut all of it out. Here I've done it with a lighter color with some Sahara sand over it to give it a little bit of extra dimension. And then what I also wanted to show you was this is the grass die cut out of the Easter basket thinlets or framelets, sorry, don't know which one it is. So I cut that out of some Crumb Cake cardstock and sponged it with a little bit of old olive and soft suede, and so I could add a little bit of grass down there. I thought that was kind of a fun touch. And this grass stamp is in the stamp set. So you can add stamped grass, or you could try that with the basket. It's an Easter basket. I thought that was kind of fun. One other thing I just wanted to point out was from the Cupcakes and Carousels paper, there is this really neat kind of sunburst paper. So I thought that went really well as a background for this card. And then I was showing these to my husband and he says, okay, two things. He says, you need a little yellow up here. So I grabbed my Daffodil Delight marker and I colored some yellow up there where the light would be. And then he says, but it needs a light. It's a lighthouse. So I was like, oh yeah, it does. So there is this stamp in the set and I decided to give that a try and I stamped it right over the card in Daffodil Delight, so that gives it a light effect. And the other thing I did was the sunburst die will cut this shape, and I cut it out of cardstock vellum and I inked some Daffodil Delight ink onto the back side, and then I put those strips, so that's vellum over the card as the light effect. So, you know, lots of different things you can do. You can play with different products and combine them. I did put the greetings on a separate piece of watercolor paper on this one. I stamped the birds on all of them because I really liked that. On some of them, I did the water image that's also in this set. So that's right down here. So I stamped that on top of the water. So I did them all differently. I'm kind of happy with my watercoloring, sort of, watercolor trying. My dad, as you probably know, is just an awesome watercolor artist. And while I did not inherit any freehand ability of drawing from him, I did inherit from both of my parents my love of color and design and architecture and travel and just this desire to make pretty things. My mom was a quilter and a gardener and just kept a beautiful house, and my dad is such an amazing watercolor artist. So I feel like I got some of those talents from them, those desires to make these pretty things. So I'm so thankful for Stampin' Up! Stamps, for the images that I can stamp, because I could never draw this lighthouse even if you were torturing me. I'm horrible at it. So anyway, just really happy with how these came out. I think they're just beautiful, and if you would like to give them a try, you will enjoy it too, I'm sure. If you have any questions, feel free to leave me a comment. If you enjoyed this, if it was helpful, you can leave a thumbs up or a comment, and I would just really enjoy reading your comments. If you need help with a Stampin' Up! Order, like I said, just go to pattystamps.com and click on the Shop Online buttons, or leave me a comment, send me an email, and I'd be happy to help you. Thanks for joining me today. See you next time.